Hello and welcome to Broadcast from Fiddler's Green, or the Fiddler's Green podcast, my weekly podcast where I talk about culture, politics, and whatnot. So I'm back from a short absence after making a standard video essay, and I've kind of been considering the future of this channel, or not the future of the channel, but the future of this podcast. I like to think we do good content here. I really like streaming with you guys. I really like answering questions. But at the same time, I feel really distinctly that the space is super saturated with live stream content. There are like 3 or 4 other people who are live streaming roughly at the same time that I am right now. And, if you guys like the show, well, that's great. I want to keep it going, but I'm seriously considering maybe cutting it back to every other week or something like that. I think there's always the danger that if you do it every other week, it becomes less a regular thing people can count on. And, the viewership goes down, and it's not very effective for the people who ordinarily want to set aside time to watch live or to chat with people on online entropy chat or whatever. But no, it's something to consider, because really, I think my utility here, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, the way I see my role in this online community is producing video essays, not in producing live stream content. And right now, even with, more or less the weekend to prepare, I don't really have a great monologue. I've kind of an attempt at one, but it's more or less just kind of considerations coming off of my latest video essay, which was on monarchy and really how women's minds behave, which is, I don't know. It's a nice little dovetail between two topics I talk a lot about. Ordinarily, when I first started this podcast, if I were to kind of give you the general idea of what I was thinking of, I really thought that this podcast would be about current events, and I would just talk about whatever was in the news. But the thing is that the world's kind of changed. It's not like there's not anything interesting going on in the news right now. It's just that the world that we live in online and the world that we live in every day doesn't really interact with the news. For instance, obviously there's a number of things that CNN is talking about right now, but none of them are really what we should be talking about right now. The two things that we really should be talking about right now are this horrific chemical spill caused by train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, I think it is. But this is completely, the chemical penetration of this spill could go all throughout northern Appalachia, across, this core area of the American heartland. And this could have lasting environmental and health impacts on a population that's already suffering from massive environmental and health impacts. But we're not talking about that. Or we could be talking about what a post-Ukraine world order would look like. Unfortunately, we can't get any reliable information out of Ukraine, so there's no, I can tell you what I've heard. Your speculations are as good as mine, but anyone who tells you they know what's going on in Ukraine is probably lying. So we have a disaster that we can observe, but knew nothing about, and we have a disaster that's created by our government that the media is basically not reporting on accurately, at least. And here we are sitting, and we're going to talk about, UFOs. That seems to be the thing that was in the conversation these days. Maybe the new Harry Potter game. The new Harry Potter game, which apparently is a cultural war touchstone. I just don't care anymore. I went through Gamergate, the advent of organizing my political reality around a controversial video game. It's no longer an appealing concept to me. This is kind of nuts. So, for the people who are here, for the people who decided to tune in on this good Tuesday night, you've tuned in for your Valentine's Day. We're going to talk about Monarchy, the Mind of the Matriarch, and Internet Psychos in probably reverse order, and how to survive a post-woke age. Because, in case you guys haven't heard, wokeness might be over. It's all winding down now. That's why the conservative press has assured me that this era of wokeness, this era of out-of-control progressivism, is winding down. They didn't lose. They won every battle that they fought. But somehow, just like in the late 90s when Clinton won his second term, we're going to have a big step back in terms of the prominence the wokeness is going to play on the world stage. And in reality, what's actually happened is the left has kind of gotten tired of its own entertainment product. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit. But here I will pose a toast for all you gentlemen out there who are watching me tonight. This is probably the worst night to broadcast since it's Valentine's Day. My rule for my family is that we never celebrate Valentine's Day on Valentine's Day. But of course, my wife brought me a treat when I was at work today. So it was really great. But at the same time, I'm like, oh no, this means that, because she gave me something today, I'll have to give her something. So sure enough, I had to stop by the florists on the way back from work. And I think, who was it? Poe from Poe the Person, or Poe's Law, commented on this. If you're a guy and you're in a florist line or in a grocery store buying flowers today, you're just in this long chain gang of these dejected, wage cucks holding flowers or chocolates, or the combination of both, sitting in line for the self-checkout line, kind of looking dejected. Not so much because they don't want to give their wives or their girlfriends Valentine's Days, but when you participate in these rituals, these kind of artificially romantic rituals, there's no way you can convince yourself that this is an act of your volition. You're doing this today because the calendar told you needed to. And Hallmark built an expectation up in your woman's mind. And because there are these unwritten rules that you naturally have to follow because you live in a society, we have to go along with this pantomime. And so you have all the husbands at 6:00 p.m. sitting in line at their self-checkout lines looking like a chain gang and about as happy. And this is romantic, guys. This is romantic. But okay, sure. I'll talk a little bit about the fairer sex today because I think it's relevant. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about ordinary stuff. I think largely, and I'll talk about this a little bit. I make video essays, obviously, and the video essays are a product of usually about a month's worth of just kind of putting things together. This last one was 3 smaller essays combined into one, and it's always kind of weird because these video essays get 13K views on average, right? And the live streams get 17 or 18 on average, and so and that's not even including the concurrent viewers, people viewing right now, right? So it's very obvious that the video essays have much less reach, but they kind of consolidate a lot of the ways that I'm thinking, and oftentimes these kind of tidbits of what I really think maybe I should just make this an entire subject of a live stream. But one of the things I wrote in the latest video essay, really the point of it, was just sort of taking stock of why are we here. I always like asking this question when it comes to lectures. This is sort of a framing mechanism I had for my recent, or I guess it was not recent, it's a year ago, my talk at the Sildings conference. You always want to answer the question, why are we here? So why are you watching this YouTube channel? Why are you listening to me this Tuesday night of all nights? Hopefully you've set up similar arrangements with your woman and you're not going along with this kind of con of Hallmark and paying exorbitant prices for a reservation at a restaurant. You've successfully avoided that trap, and instead you're here listening to me and talk about politics and culture and stuff like that. What's the point of my channel? Why do I make video essays? Why are you consuming video essays? Is it just entertainment? Am I part of the attention economy? I mean, I like to think that I'm not, but really the purpose of us being here is to kind of process modernity in a real way. And then I'm kind of going to copy my line from the Substack. The purpose of political thought is to cultivate the right psychological attitude towards the age that we live in. Because we hope that with the right psychological attitude, if we mull it over, if we kind of approach it in the right way, when we interact with the world productively, this will have enormous effects. We'll have better ideas. We'll have ideas that occur to us faster. We won't get stuck inside cycles of depression or in sort of mental traps where it seems like our entire society is caught in mental traps. Our entire society is caught in mental traps because they have not developed the right psychological attitude towards the spirit of the age. Obviously, there's the example of the boomers, right? This is everyone in our circle that's either my age or younger loves complaining about the boomers, or people who exhibit boomer mentality. And I'm certainly guilty of that on occasion, being an older millennial. And actually, for the most part, when people complain about boomers, they're usually complaining about people who are Gen X. And most of the boomers are in their 60s or 70s at this stage, and really their participation in the political sphere at this stage is more or less a memory unless they have some emeritus position. So really when people talk about the boomer mentality or the boomer truth regime, that in many ways traps both our attitude towards culture and our attitude towards politics, they're talking about Generation Xers, but it's a mental trap that's very easy to see nonetheless if you're a person who's grown up on the internet. And this is the fact that people just can't get out of this perspective of living in a world of sort of an established default order. This order has completely fallen away. This order exists now only as a shadow that is imminently going to be torn down by the next generation once there's a changing of the guard at the highest level, or that will be replaced by people who are totally incompetent and will do it in. But because the previous generation has this idea that there's this standard natural order of things that conforms itself to the mode of classic Americana, the same order you see in The Simpsons, the same order you see in Leave It to Beaver, that you see in The Cosby Show, This is the order of America, and it's indestructible, and every episode ends the same way it began, and so on and so forth. We're so in that mode that captures our perception of the universe, and it constrains any kind of proper way we have of reacting to the world as we actually see it. If you could kind of unhook yourself from this attitude and just experience the 2020s with new eyes, you would immediately see a country that has just this disintegrating level of trust, and that is kind of coming apart before your very eyes. And the crash in East Palestine is a perfect example of this. But in fact, in many ways, as much as I'd like to bash boomers in this talk, because it certainly is fun, right? What we're going to talk about today is not the pathology of the boomers, but the pathology of millennials in particular. And this comes from being raised in the information economy and the attention economy, as they call it right now. Because this is what, and people make fun of me, Dave's live stream is basically him complaining about what he sees on Twitter and what he sees on YouTube. I mean, what else am I going to talk about? I mean, I'm going to talk about the dialogue that's going on in the community that more or less takes place on Twitter, although you see it in Substack too. Twitter is just those fights that are happening faster and in real time. But it's important to talk about, and it's important to digest, because our political consciousness as millennials, as Zoomers, is developed on Twitter, whether we like it or not. And insofar as I can help people kind of step over these problems, it's worth reviewing it. Okay, now I'm about to violate another one of my rules tonight, which is I'm talking about somebody who I never said I'd talk about on this podcast, out of general principle. Yes, because it's kind of pertinent to my discussion here. Let's see, Linux, don't fail me here. Okay, yes. So this is something that I want to talk about a little bit, and that is the internet psychopath. The internet psychopath really is a product of the millennial generation. You saw a little bit in my generation. You saw the troll, the classic 4chan troll, was the product of my older generation of millennials. And really, Steve Saylor had a blog post this week about how our generational framework was all wrong and it lumps people together that shouldn't really be together. And that's absolutely true. For instance, younger Gen Xers and older millennials should be in one group, and younger millennials and older Zoomers should be in another group, right? If you're a digital native, that's the person I'm talking about. Because although the Xers and the millennials definitely came up with the idea of the troll and the internet psycho iteration 1.0, it didn't really happen until the younger millennials that this archetype got solidified. And it's a product of a certain kind of institutional, specifically academic product. And you can see this all the time on Bread. It's a product of sort of the decline of academia and the rise of the attention economy. And the fact that people have prioritized these things like intelligence and academic credentials and being the smartest person in the room. This was, for millennials, this was the most important thing to be. And the way you exhibited this, the way you sort of made good on being the smartest person in the room, is to become an influencer. And so you can kind of imagine these two tectonic forces crafting a new generation of psychopaths. So obviously the person I have on the screen here is a well-known internet psychopath called President Sunday. And I'll tell you the entire story. Who cares? And I'll tell you basically, if you pay attention to BreadTube, and I will only know because people forward me these things because they know that I kind of have one foot in the stream, so to speak, when it comes to paying attention to leftist drama. You'll know that this person has become an incredibly prominent gadfly in the left-wing circle. And I have this really strange history with this individual. And I should preface this by saying this is a total psychopath. But I think when I first met, so this is a person who I met in real life at my first attempt at basket weaving. And I encouraged him to start a YouTube channel and to kind of get online because he seemed interested in politics. As his name suggests, his original, his name is a reference to G.K. Chesterton, the man who was Thursday, where the President Sunday is sort of the villain slash. It's basically the Deus Ex Machina. He's sort of like the god behind the curtain figure, so to speak, in the mystery of the man who was Thursday. And so originally in this guy's inception, he was posing as a right-winger because this was 2018, 2019. The right wing was the king of internet blood sports. This was the era of Andy Worski, of JF Gariepi, of the huge Superchat donations. And slowly, though, over the course of the ascendancy of 2019, the left wing was ascendant. And as you might imagine, this psycho starts kind of going off the rails. He gets a hold of people's private information and starts essentially threatening doxes. And not only that, his whole shtick is that he's an academic. He has this academic credential that's unquestionable. It's a bachelor's in some kind of sociology or whatever. But no, he's an academic, and his big draw, the reason why he's able to kind of play this role, and kind of pose, and the reason why people don't immediately identify him as a troll, is he has this nice deep voice. He has this nice deep voice that makes it sound like he's an academic. Obviously everyone who watches my channel knows that I have a speech impediment. My friend the Franklin makes fun of me all the time for this. I spent most of my early young adult life reading, and oftentimes I don't have the right pronunciation of words, and I have a very nasally voice as well, which oftentimes irritates a lot of people. People call it the gay voice or whatever. This is just how I speak. And that's fine. You come for the ideas, hopefully, more than you do my voice. But President Sunday has this great advantage that he has this very deep voice, and he sounds very authoritative. And he's able to sound very introspective. This guy's entire career has been going around accusing people of things and creating drama. And then when they retaliate, threatening to release private information or accidentally releasing private information. To the point where we are right now, where everybody knows this guy he's threatened my docs, and he has literally doxed several other people in this online space, and has facilitated several cancellation campaigns against their employers. He's gone variously from presenting himself as a right-winger, an advocate of Carl Schmitt, no less, as everyone says, the infamous Third Reich social scientist, right? Popular in our circles, but now that he's presenting himself as a bread tuber, I'm wondering how he squares that. To essentially portraying himself as sort of the internet hall monitor for the left. So, I'm kind of halfway through coming up with this talk. I'm not coming up with this talk because I didn't prepare for this at all, as you might imagine, but kind of mulling over what I was going to talk about today on the podcast. My friend Ubersoy sends me this link to Sunday's latest little excursion into cancellation. So apparently he's gone after this person called Not So Erudite, who is this. She's doing the classic kind of, I won't call it a grift, but if you're a reasonably good-looking woman in a graduate program for a reasonably sexy science like psychology, or sociology or biology, a lot of people make careers part-time doing streams where they explain sort of the basic facts of these sciences, read papers, and because there's a certain amount of eye candy there, it's very, very popular. Well, of course, Sunday in his typical mode, he what's so funny is that this is something that he lays into her for plagiarism, misrepresenting her credentials, and any number of other malfeasances. And this is, you can kind of see the form of the internet psycho in this case. The internet psycho loves academic jargon. The internet psycho loves academic jargon for several reasons. First of all, because it allows you to make kind of these accusations of professional malfeasance, which are very, very hard for me to ignore. For instance, people remember this somebody called the Liberal Sanity Project, who back in 2019 made these accusations against Black Pigeon Speaks of plagiarism, right? And this is, I don't think that Liberal Sanity Project he kind of dabbles in this internet psychopathy, but I think that he's just a standard midwit who doesn't understand how this stuff works on the internet or how lectures work generally. And he was able to kind of like organize this pseudo cancellation campaign against Black Pigeon Speaks, which ultimately ended up not being successful under the idea that Black Pigeon Speaks had plagiarized some academic paper because a copypasta appeared of that paper's work inside his video. And well, it turned out it was in the citations. So all in all, it looked like sort of just like Black Pigeon Speaks not bracketing things properly. And I think Black Pigeon Speaks has had problems with taking other people's work and putting it in his own without citing them, which is a huge problem. So I mean, at least in that it was like maybe a little bit justified. The thing with plagiarism, what makes it so effective, is that anyone who's accused of it immediately, since this is such a sudden death accusation in the academy, making the accusation of plagiarism immediately stops the presses and forces you to respond. And the thing is that this is what somebody loves. Also, falsifying your credentials, displaying yourself as a doctor when you're not a doctor, or calling yourself a lawyer when you're not a lawyer, or calling yourself a sociologist. And it gets kind of ridiculous after a while, because half the people, I mean, does a bachelor's degree make you a scientist? Does it make you a sociologist? Certainly, every one of these internet psychos likes to present themselves that way. But these degrees don't really mean anything formalized like a doctor. But still, nevertheless, the call out is what works, right? The call out is what matters, because anyone who's accused of falsifying their credentials immediately has to answer. The whole point of this internet psycho is to create sort of the impression that somebody is being completely discredited without actually introducing anything substantive into the conversation whatsoever. So you make accusations. They're irresponsible. They're racist, sexist, they're homophobic, blah, 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 blah. Things that will get you fired from a modern university. They plagiarized. They're misrepresenting who they are. What's also so great about these accusations, too, is because plagiarism and misrepresentation of academic credentials is sort of a borderline illegal action, it also excuses it also is used by these psychos as an excuse for doxing. Because the person who participates in these cancellation campaigns can excuse their bad behavior by explaining, well, I have to dox them. Otherwise, they would get away with plagiarism and misrepresenting their academic credentials and spreading misinformation. So by doing sort of the biggest faux pas on the internet, by acting like a total psycho, I'm actually being a Boy Scout. I'm actually enforcing norms on this whole system. I'm the good guy. And so it's kind of funny how long this has worked. Because for President Sunday, you can see, and he's not alone in doing this. There's a whole class of people, specifically younger Zoomers. They got through their undergraduate degree, and they learned all of the bad things that you're not supposed to do, and that will immediately get you expelled. And they've learned that if you accuse someone of these bad things, they immediately have to run around like a chicken with their head cut off, because if the accusation is allowed to stand, it will ruin their careers. So there's a necessary response. And they've also learned, and this is, I think, is another important step, they've also learned a certain trick that academics have, the academic frame game. Now, anyone who's gone through graduate school knows how this works. And the academy, it pays to keep talking and to keep framing things. And the worst thing you can do in the academy is pretend like you don't have an answer. Oftentimes, and this is a thing with the academy in particular, as it stands currently, there are whole fields that don't generate definitive answers ever. They only develop partial results or theories or conjectures or so on and so forth. And whereas it takes a lot of effort to develop a proof. It takes a lot of effort to develop a successful scientific experiment in the full sense of the word. It takes a lot of effort to develop a peer-reviewed statistical study that has proper methods and proper controls. It takes absolutely no work to develop a conjecture or a speculation or an investigation. So people who get into graduate school, since a lot of your time is given sort of delivering talks about research that hasn't been completed yet and that hasn't been reviewed yet and that hasn't been submitted for applications, and this obviously rubs off on undergraduates too. A lot of the skills you develop in grad school are just talking a lot about bullshit, about things you didn't have a point for. And it's sort of reframe. So you learn how to sound intelligent without actually ever contributing anything or saying anything. And so what a lot of these internet psychos have learned is that if you take this sort of meandering intellectual frame game where you endlessly humble brag about your own credentials while preening about some academic theory that's not your own, well, and mumbling about various conjectures you've had, and you do it in the right voice, and then, on occasion, you mix this sort of academic blather in with sort of salacious accusations against bigger people that they can't possibly ignore, you get a formula for completely capturing the attention economy in any given space. I can't believe how long the script has worked, because President Sunday started his channel, I think in 2018. Right when I was kind of at the heyday of my own channel, producing like big videos, because that was the gap between my own graduate studies and entering the workforce as kind of a wage cuck, which I had a lot of time, right? So he started the channel, basically, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago now? That sounds like a long time ago. I guess it's more like 4 years ago. And this guy has gone 4 years of making pretty regular content, and he hasn't introduced a single new idea. He hasn't stood behind any kind of force. The people who would watch his channel still could not tell you a single idea this guy has. Yet he's been on all the debate channels. He's gone to fights with Destiny and Vosh and all of the big channels that actually produce videos with good editing skills and theses and that explore points and try to teach people things. He completely dominates the attention economy, and he does it by playing this game, and it never seems to get old. All he does is have the facsimile of an academic. He has the exterior form of the academic, and then he combines that by just inciting train wrecks, make a salacious accusation with no base, use that as a springboard to make more salacious accusations that have no basis, and then use that as an excuse to dox people. And your opponents can't help but respond. So I'm tuning into this sort of not so erudite the channel, and my Uber soy forwarded to me as a takedown of President Sunday. I didn't need one. The guy is a complete nutcase, and a hazard to like anyone who gets involved with him. Period. He'll eventually turn on anyone who is his ally. But what's so funny is that I watched this entire video, and it's not so obviously President Sunday did what he typically did. He accused this person, not so erudite, with being a plagiarist, with misrepresenting her credentials, with all sorts of academic malfeasance. This person is a grad student. Obviously, they can't let these accusations stand, because if someone accuses you of these things publicly as an academic and you don't answer them, your career is over. And so what happens? Not So Erudite basically does a 1-hour stream talking about President Sunday. and she's a way bigger channel than him. And so you see how for 4 years, this is the only thing this guy has done. And he's gotten bigger than, most other people who do wonderful work on the right wing or who are stuck in a distant sphere. And it's completely... And I'm just watching Not So Erudite go through all of her credentials, read off her resume in detail, talk about all the jobs she's worked at, go through source after source after source, showing how psychometricians or whatever are credentialed or how they're not credentialed. And it goes on for an hour, and I'm laughing, not at Sunday, but at her. because she's completely been trolled by this act. Every time I hear sort of accusations of plagiarism, or every time I hear sort of an assumption of like academic merit when no one has an idea or no one's able to actually put forward an idea, I immediately think internet psycho. And 90% of the time I'm right. This guy's not the only one who's doing this. But he's completely captured the economy in this space. Because the entirety of BreadTube, the entirety of the left-wing sphere on YouTube runs on outrage. That's the only thing that motivates it anymore. And so they slowly start eating each other. When I was first met Sunday with she was my wife at that point, but we had just been married. And I kind of was on the ride back from, I don't know if we called it basket weaving back then. I remember talking to her and she's like, I think that guy is a little bit off, don't you? And I'm like, yeah. And of course I don't listen to her, and I continue to have interactions with him. But I remember when the problem started emerging, and my wife said something very, very wise. She said, the best thing that could happen is for him to become a left-winger. The best thing you could hope for is for President Sunday to become a big part of the online left, because this guy is going to destroy any space that he's attached to. He's going to take down every single other productive person and get them to spend endless amount of time reacting to him. And nothing will ever get done in any kind of community, in any kind of space where he is, because he will always attack the people around him. And this is, I kind of remember that my wife telling me this when I was watching the video and thinking, well, I mean, it's kind of amazing the things that women are able to suss out. My friend Black Horse had kind of a dig on women a few weeks ago. He said the way women think, they're basically walking appeals to authority. Because the way women's minds typically work when it comes to intellectual debates is they try to find the right side rather than trying to find the right idea. And unless they're trained not to, that's their instinct. Their instinct is always to find the good side and then to go with that side. And they usually determine the good side by determining the good men. I'm not going to mince words here, right? But to me, calling women walking appeals to authority is kind of like calling birds walking flying machines. The whole point of the female mind is that it's totally oriented towards determining the proper authority. That's sort of its animating genius. And there's something deep about inside women where they can suss out psychos and people who are time wasters and people who are kind of trying to ride clout in ways that men oftentimes can't see immediately. And maybe I'm just trying to draw excuses for my own kind of lack of foresight. But this is sort of what I kind of wanted to get at with the majority of this talk. This is a problem that the right has had for really this last year. And I've talked about this all the time here. Just this week, there's another one of these. There's been an ongoing split between the Bronze Age pervert sphere, the people who are in the raw egg nationalists, the pickup artist people, the Evola people, and sort of the standard Christian conservatives. This is something that I've raged against again and again, and it's... The problem with this thing is that when it comes to people like President Sunday and the rest of the online psychos, it's humorous because these people are terrible people that have no ideas and who are only able to generate drama. And the only future they have is taking down everyone with them in a huge ball of drama and flame. But when it comes to people in the BAP sphere, the reason why I continuously bring it up is at this stage, I know these people. I know these people. I know they're good people. But we still kind of fall into this problem of not really reacting to the age we live in properly. The original kind of thing that kicked it off this week was a tweet, a tweet that was given by Matt Walsh. And Matt Walsh's tweet was something like, this is probably in preparation for Valentine's Day, because this is the kind of cringe normie-con tweet that you get very regularly from these types. They want to kind of celebrate home life, to encourage men to seek home life. Now, as a lot of modern millennial men will tell you, not without purpose, a large amount of the sort of bottleneck when it comes to actually getting people to marry off comes not from the men, but from the women. But still, it's not uncommon, like I said, to see men kind of string women along and never marry them for years and years and years and years, or kind of get into a dating market with the idea that they might want to get married, but never kind of pull the trigger. And so they dither, they meander, they waste a lot of time. They're essentially living a domesticated life. They're essentially attached to one woman. They're not out there conquering the world, but they never pull a trigger on their family. And by the time they actually marry their fiance or their girlfriend, like, they're both in their late 30s, and their prospects for having even a single child are looking really, really grim. And so I'm sure Matt Walsh is thinking about these people when he's making this tweet, and he says something to the effect of, the only thing guys want is to come home to a woman who's dedicated to you and loves you, and a family full of children, and she's making dinner for you, and she's able to greet you with a kiss, and that makes your entire work day worth it. And there's nothing better than this. We're simple creatures, men. That's all we want, is just to have these simple pleasures of coming home to married life. Now, of course, as you might imagine, this triggers feminists, and that was obviously Matt Walsh's initial impetus. But this triggers a secondary problem, because all of the Bronze Age pervert, sort of Nietzschean masculine guys who want to conquer the world with their beach bodies or whatever, hop on this as well and start making all these longhouse jokes about this. The longhouse is something that I referenced in my last essay about this vision of degraded monarchy. The longhouse is the place where civilization has reached its peak. It has no more horizons to reach for. It has no more wars to fight. So the entire society is sort of sublimated into this interior life where politics rule the day, where niceties and mannerisms are the coin that carries political favors, and everything is just ruled over by these obese women that act as sort of pseudo-matriarchs and jailers and policers of vice and virtue, hallway monitors. And you think of the Longhouse and you immediately see exactly the kind of personality that gave us the internet psycho, that gave us the non-academic academic, who tries to nail everyone for technicalities and has nothing himself to say. This obviously, and of course, the Bronze Age pervert guys were sort of retweeting this vision of Matt Walsh sitting next to this morbidly obese, fertility goddess that you see in a lot of these Stone Age etchings, and making fun of him as sort of being like this longhouse cuck chained to this woman his ambitions are completely constrained. He can't imagine anything more than bringing home money to make money for his wife and her children. What could you even imagine a more cucked perspective? Where is your Faustian spirit that's always reaching for the horizon, that's always reaching for the stars? And now you're telling me that the greatest ambition a man has is to just pop out more kids, is to be the Ward Cleaver guy? Okay, I get it, right? This is what's the problem with all of these things. And first of all, the problem is that I can't ignore these things. And the reason why I can't ignore them is because the fissures that occur on Twitter become larger fissures. They become aesthetic Twitter fissures in the community that actually correspond to people taking sides. People are writing essays on this. They're drawing lines between friend enemy. They're inviting and not inviting each other to conferences and live streams based on this. This has impacts. Twitter is indeed real life in this sense. And as I already said before, it's not like these are internet anons. These are people whose books I've bought and reviewed. These are people who I know in real life. These are community members. These are people that I've worked with, that I am working with, to try to get projects off the ground, like our conferences and, God willing, our publications in the future, and our basket weaving projects. These are upstanding, these are great guys. And they're participating in this dialectic that is kind of nuts. it's kind of, I mean, it's fundamentally nuts because it totally misunderstands what's going on here. The whole just like the internet psycho routine works because the person who's posing as the internet psycho is pretending to be an academic. Professors are very circumspect. Professors are typically, I mean, they like talking about ideas a lot, but they don't. Most good professors do not like causing drama. And if they do like causing drama, they don't usually get promoted inside actual physical departments very often. So if a professor with his tweed jacket and his pipe and sort of his nerdy disposition were to come out and make a public accusation against another professor that he was plagiarizing, then that would be a big deal, wouldn't it? Like that would be huge. The one thing you know immediately at that point that one of those two professors was not going to have a career at the university after that fight erupted, right? The difficulty is that this is the internet. So no one cares if you actually are a professor or if you actually do have this disposition or you do have these qualities. All they care is that you look like one. And so that's how the internet psycho works. He works because he looks like a professor. He sounds like a professor. He does professorial kind of things. He does what lay people think professors do. And as such, his accusations have this huge weight to them. Now let's take it to, the much more forgivable case in this whole BAP dynamic. Now, obviously, is Matt Walsh objectively right? Matt Walsh's statement is objectively wrong. Everyone knows this. Nobody. Is it really true? Is it really true? It's like one of those T-shirts that says, "What if the hokey pokey is really what it's all about?" Right? It's obviously these statements that are not meant to be taken literally. But just humor me for a moment, guys, and say, is it really true that that the human male's ambition is totally just the facilitation of the hearth? All he wants is just the wife with kids, and there's nothing more in his soul that cries out for more, that cries out for a broader horizon. Well, gee, man. I mean, Matt Walsh is a Catholic, and I think St. Augustine might have one or two things to say about the hearth being the end-all, be-all of man's desires. I think there's something he writes in the Confessions about there being a need for divinity and a need for the infinite that's implicit inside man's souls. So obviously, what Matt Walsh is saying is not true. Duh, right? And I don't honestly think, I mean, maybe there are some genuine people who are suffering from myopia, what we call on the internet to be autism. They're suffering from internet autism, and they don't actually understand that Matt Walsh is speaking figuratively. They also don't seem to understand that the audience Matt Walsh is speaking to is overwhelmingly sort of middle-of-the-road guys. This is not some kind of commencement speech to Harvard. This is not Matt Walsh, the spiritual master, sending his apprentice off into the world. This is not Caine from Kung Fu, imparting wisdom to Grasshopper as he goes on his mission into the world. And the mystic says, Yoda says, remember, the only thing that matters is having a wife and tons of kids. This is not the type of advice you're getting from Matt Walsh. You're getting the sort of Tim Allen home improvement sort of advice, the sort of colloquial folk wisdom that you get from your next door neighbor peeking over the fence with just his eyes. This is obviously meant for a pedestrian audience. This is obviously meant for a median audience. But we have to interpret this as this being a philosophical statement. And so the dunks come in saying that, oh, no, what we need is Chan Superman. What we need is warlords. And so, you push back on this. A lot of people push back on this. And some people generally don't understand what's going on. They don't understand where they are, it seems. Because the rehash is Matt Walsh isn't going to fix our present problems. We're in a civilizational crisis. Obviously, everyone can see that. We are in a declining civilization, and we are all grasping for something new to come about. And so the rejoinder from the bad people is, Matt Walsh isn't going to fix this problem with civilizations. His family isn't going to solve anything. But one great man might. And that's why BAP's right in this argument. But this is the problem, right? And this is where BAP being technically right sort of falls down. Because Matt Walsh actually is a guy that has a wife and tons of kids. And BAP is not an Itchan Superman that's imminently going to take over the world or take over the United States and institute a new Caesarism. That's bullshit. BAP and Matt Walsh both have the exact same profession. They're both podcasters. They're both authors. You could argue Bronze Age Mindset's a better book than, kind of conservative schlock that Matt Walsh generates. Sure. Okay. I find Matt Walsh to be kind of more relatable and less of an online weirdo, and that counts for something. But they've got the same job. Like, in reality, we're talking about the same kind of people. Moreover, like, the really silly thing about all of this, the really silly thing about this entire perspective, if there was a Caesar, if this person, if we were in the process, if we were in the time period in which sort of prospective reformers, prospective great men were arriving on the scene to potentially change things in a serious way. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we'll be there for another decade or two. Really, probably till, I think, again, like I said before, I think it's really more my son's generation that's going to do this, not my own, which kind of makes, the prospect of running down people who have families even more ridiculous when you think about it that way. But I won't get into that, right? But let's say, for instance, that we are indeed in that age where the great man of history is indeed imminent, where the reforming Caesar, where the Charlemagne, where the Merovingian kings, where sort of the first seedlings of a new order are coming about, and the men of action are once again kind of on the horizon to take society in a different direction. What's the first thing you kind of look for in the great men? Like, what distinguishes... I mean, obviously, like, there's this joke that Curtis Yarvin... people give me crap for always mentioning Curtis Yarvin, but I think, this was a common joke in 2019. People are kind of... There's a revival... 2020, I should say. There's a revival of monarchism going around then. And when there's also this thing called Chaz going on. And Chaz is ruled by, like, this druggy, like, aspiring rap artist. And everyone kind of jokingly, they jokingly say, oh, well, he'll be the next king of America, right? Because he's taken control of this small Capitol Hill neighborhood with his posse of guys wielding semi-automatic rifles. So he'll be the new king. In the event that you're actually having to deal with sort of men who are kind of taking control over things, there are going to be any number of people, like, who's the guy that people talk about in Haiti, the warlord named Barbecue, the sort of mafioso. He's rumored. Rumor has it, and I've heard this is apocryphal, that he has the name Barbecue because he literally lights his opponents on fire with gasoline. And these are the characters we're talking about. This is not like in the age where you're actually staring down the possibility of chaos. These warlords are like everywhere. If you are functioning as a conscious political animal in the circumstances, first of all, you're almost certainly not Caesar himself. You're almost certainly not the great man of history yourself. The way you're getting out of this age of chaos is you're thinking, who can I trust? Who among all of these strong men who are vying for my loyalty, who do I bend a knee towards? Who do I actually think is worthy of my submission? I obviously can't wield power. The democratic pretension that ordinary people can wield power is ridiculous. The only power you have is to decide who you give that power up to. And in this way, being a proper subject is very much being in a feminine capacity, right? You have an ultimate choice, but your choice is the choice of submission. And to a certain degree, it is your prerogative, but at the same time, at the end of the day, the resolution of this thing is you functionally wielding no sovereignty. What do you look for in a monarch? Lots of metrics. You look for strength, you look for wisdom, you look for intelligence. But on the temperament side, pretty good indication of whether somebody is properly monarchical spiritually or whether they're a tyrant is whether they insult you for no reason. And this is one of the reasons why I know the present aristocracy, the present ruling class, has lost the mandate of heaven. Whenever a system, because, we're all humans, we're all chimpanzees, or as people say, right? We're all kind of evolved chimpanzees, if you believe in evolution. And I probably shouldn't make allusions because I find sort of evolutionary analogies cringe. We are all creatures that have a huge animalistic nature to us. And because of that, we are chaotic creatures that love power. And all we want to do is grab power. And we can't grab power, so what's the next best thing? The next best thing is to humiliate your enemies. And so if you have a little bit of power, you could use it for good, or you could make yourself feel really, really good by insulting them and humiliating them and earning yourself an enemy. A very good way for distinguishing bullies from leaders, from distinguishing tyrants from kings, is whether when they have power, do they use that power to actually improve things and to bring those up below them? Do they use it to elevate their subordinates and make them better and make their people healthier? Or do they use that power to insult those lower than them? If we grant the premise of Baps that a great man of history is the only solution to our present age, and that's certainly not historically unwarranted, the great man of history will distinguish himself by not doing what Bap and his acolytes were doing all last week. They will need the support of patriarchs to rule. They can't rule without it, and they certainly can't have another generation without it. Why would a great man of history, when given a microphone, use that microphone to undermine his power base? Well, he does it because he's not acting in a monarchical way. He's acting in the way of the attention economy. Bap knows he's not the great man of history, but his goal isn't to be the great man of history. His goal is to look like the great man of history. And I say that being a huge fan of his book. He is a very talented writer, I think. I don't know if we'll be able to, like I said, there are such things as one-hit wonders, so genius can be accidental, and it's not, and Baps only has that one book that's worth reading. But, genius is genius, and Bronze Age mindset is that. So, he has that going for him, but he's not Caesar. And what I kind of find frustrating about this bodybuilding thing is bodybuilding really it's the closest you can get with being a powerful person without actually doing anything. If you were an athlete, there would be some measure of your aptitude outside of your presentation. But with bodybuilding, the only aptitude you have is literally the presentation. And oftentimes with these guys, it's not even they're not even posing physique. It's completely hypothetical. It's completely behind a wall of anonymity. So all we have at the end of the day is the President Sunday formula. You have the deep voice. You have the voice that sounds like a professor. Well, congratulations. You have the physique shots that make you look like some figure from a Nietzschean Superman. Like not even an illustration, like a comic book of it. You have the trappings of an athlete. You have the form of one. But you're still a podcaster. You're still a minor author. You're still in the same distance space as we all are. And in the meantime, your solution to this, your use of power, is to undermine the very substructure that you want to lean on. And this is, this is kind of what I want to get to as the last part of this talk. A little rambly. Didn't have time to prepare so much, as much as I'd like. Again, I'd really like to spend more of my time doing actual essays. There's not like some exterior. This is the left has this. The left chases clout, and they cry and they whine. There was this great thing from back in the day with men's rights activists, where they always said this thing like, if you're lost in the woods and people know where you are, right? It's you never want to move, right? Because people know that you're in the woods. Eventually, they'll send a search party, and if you wander around, you'll make yourself harder to find. And in the meantime, you'll tire yourself out and get yourself dehydrated and die faster. So the best thing you can do is to stay put. But if you're lost in the woods and nobody knows where you are and there is no search party, the only option you have is to try to find yourself a way out of the situation. If not to find your way back to civilization, to find yourself to some area where you could possibly survive. So your movement and your action is absolutely essential. The left cries and whines and preens and fully participates in the attention economy because attention for the left means that they get paid. Attention is also their path to political power. They are applying the democratic will, the voice, the system of voice-based power. They're sitting there on top of an apparatus, whining loudly because they know that somebody eventually is going to come up by, give them money, give them power, fix their needs. We are not in this situation. The only people that we have to solve our problems is us. This is it. What we build is what we have. The allies we can make is our coalition. The leaders that we can facilitate and develop are our leadership, or is our basis for actually going forward. Cultivating this is the reason why I'm talking to you right now, and the reason why this is a frequent topic on these podcasts. It's because I think people just misunderstand this. They don't have the right mindset on this. We're still in this leftist mode where creating a big hubbub, creating a big knife fight is beneficial to your ratings on streaming, on social media. And all it does is earn you enemies. I mean, what about these fights is actually going to generate new people who make contributions to this scene? What is actually going to generate new communities? Your entire objective as a right-winger right now is to facilitate a synthesis between yourself and the mainstream normicons, to make it easy for them to be our allies, to make it easy for them to surrender to us. That's our job. And this week, we all decided that we needed to take a big step back for some reason randomly. Because, as I'm fond of saying, friends are an asset, enemies are a liability. People still haven't gotten over this. The post-woke age is kind of upon us. I think people are right in pointing out that the enthusiasm the left has for politics is just draining away this year. They just don't care anymore. The big streamer channels are way down in terms of viewers. I don't need to say anything more about places like the Young Turks and CNN. They never recovered from the post-Trump dip in ratings. People are tired of politics. And as such, wokeness, the fervor around being in the right, the fervor around canceling people and demonstrating that you are ascendant, that's fading. But it's becoming institutionalized. It's becoming solidified into law. George Floyd, the 2020 explosion of wokeness in the wake of George Floyd, was the last, well, I mean, maybe they'll get another one, but it felt to me like their last big explosion before the real crises set in. That this is the last time where normies are going to be totally on board with this stuff as an entertainment product that feels good and right and just. And so the more astute and the more aware among them realized very quickly that they had to use this year, or I should say that year, 2020, to get across the finish line, to institutionalize as much of wokeness as possible in the form of diversity, equity, inclusion as they possibly could. Because every subsequent step would be very, very obviously a rank and position of power on private individuals, and could not be sold to people as being a spontaneous outpouring of public will. When we say that we're in a post-woke age, we are pointing to a real phenomenon, but we are pointing to the phenomenon where the woke politics basically derives not so much, I mean, it derives a little bit from genuine religious fanaticism, but it drives mostly through just the stale machinations, the stale and boring turnings of bureaucratic cogs. Our job is to not be crushed by those cogs for as long as possible. Our job is to essentially deconstruct the radical side of the left. I see this more and more that you know, the left is trying to put the woke away because they realize that they are losing some amount of Generation X. Since the Trump delusion is no longer there and in the news and sexy, it's no longer possible to convince Generation Xers and other people with a boomer mindset that the only reason why things are this bad is because of the bad orange Hitler. It's very, very apparent that there are metastasizing institutional failures at the heart of the unelected government, at the heart of the establishment, that are causing these problems to actually manifest. And wokeness only highlights this crisis more. So everyone in the Biden administration, or a lot of people I should say, not everyone, they this year in particular are slowly trying to de-emphasize this radical stuff as much as possible. I might be going out on a limb saying this, but I don't think that there'll be any more Dylan Mulvaney's in the White House in the year 2023. I think that's going to be kind of put away. But the problem is that the left proper was promised a revolution in 2020. It was promised a revolution in 2018. It was promised a revolution in 2016. And they never generated a revolution. There are a lot of people on the left who are going to be asking questions about this as they put the woke away. This actually is the best time, if possible, to engage with the left, to kind of reach out to them for dialogue and conversation, because they're so transparently fake. I know I mention this person all the time. My favorite person to interact with on social media is Ben Burgess and Matt McManus, because their pretense of being revolutionaries is just so transparently false. I think they realize that their pretense of being revolutionaries is absolutely ridiculous. I think they realize that their pretense of being radicals is nuts. But they have to maintain this because they're selling this stuff to Zoomers. They're selling this stuff to 18-year-olds. And they can't, what are they going to do? Walk in on their first day of class and go, oh, hey guys, every single person in our entire government and the entire university thinks that democratic, social democracy, with the Nordic model as the imminent plan, and socialism someday maybe is the right way to go. And so you guys all should really, really get on board with that worldview, because this time we're going to do it right, even though we haven't done it right for the last 60 years since we've been promising it. They can't tell that to freshmen, fresh-faced, coming in from high school, looking for some kind of new optimistic vision. So they have to spin this bullshit about revolutionary radical socialism and use that as a bottle and kind of use that to repackage their incredibly stale social democratic ideas and real sell them as phony radicalism. And I love this because nobody who's watching this stuff on the Young Turks buys this anymore. It's a transparently phony project. And every single time people drip off from this, the purview of the right-wing crows. We have a space that you actually talk about ideas. Just on Sunday night, I was talking to my good friend Todd Lewis about Yarvin. And it's amazing, right? Because Todd and I come from very different worlds. And we also have very, very different intellectual approaches to the problem. And we are... we're, again, I can say we have different approaches, right? And, he did this entire series on sort of, what is it? He calls it getting past the mole bug matrix or whatever. And to be quite honest, everyone should go watch it because he does great work. But to say it's not my style is a massive understatement. Todd is a very details focused guy where I really like to kind of hit broad generalities. But talking to him on Charlemagne's stream 2 nights ago, I was, kind of amazed that his criticism of the details of Curtis Yarvin actually solidified my own criticisms of Yarvin and his own idea on what was going to come next, what directions we should be looking towards. They were fruitful, they were generative, You could have this conversation and new ideas would flower forth. The whole point of this channel, the whole point of me kind of rehashing my thoughts on a Tuesday evening, is so you guys can make your own content, have your own conversations, and kind of digest these ideas and not have to kind of jump the hurdles that I'm going through. The whole idea is to kind of be generative. The mark of a true monarch is that he elevates his subordinates as opposed to humiliating them like a tyrant does. A tyrant humiliates his subordinates needlessly, and a monarch, a proper monarch, elevates them. A proper online space, further right, are going to be people that elevate their opponents, not denigrate them. We want the strongest representations of the left. We want the most intellectually honest critics of Curtis Yarvin. If I'm going to get a takedown of Curtis Yarvin's ideas, it better look a lot more like Todd Lewis's and a lot less like Professor Matt McManus's. Professor Matt McManus, despite his academic credentials, thinks that he can scoff at Yarvin and use moralisms to answer factual contentions, which is not good science. Todd, while I sometimes agree with him and sometimes don't, actually answers the propositions as they occur. And he answers factual contention with factual contention and primary sources with primary sources. And while Todd is certainly not a leftist, the greatest criticism of Yarvin you can find on the internet right now is on the right wing. And someday, hopefully, maybe, the best socialists will be on the right wing. The best distributists will be on the right wing. The best nationalists will be on the right wing. The right wing, or the distance sphere, or the sphere that's insulated from both the incredible hollowness of the establishment academy and the attention economy of the online space dominated by internet psychos at this stage, like President Sunday. The only alternative will be the space that we participate in here. This is the best way to get ideas to kind of mull over the events of the day and hopefully improve your own understanding of the world. And if you hate Yarvin, I want you to find the best goddamn critic of Yarvin out there. I want you to find the best damn critic of myself out there, and I want to talk to them. And I don't want to hide behind moralisms and credentials and insinuations that I'm academic and they're not. I want the ideas to thrive because the ideas will lead to better attitudes, and the better attitudes will cause the individuals that listen to us thrive. And the only way to create a new world is through better individuals and better heroic action, which is me, which is you, which is probably more important than either me or you, the generation that we bring up after us, that isn't poisoned by these horrible intellectual spaces. And that hopefully that we're communicating with right now to some certain limited degree, even if only indirectly. So guys, with that, I'm going to end the monologue, and I'm going to go to Superchats, a little bit shorter one this time. I'll see you in a few minutes, and this is the intermission. right, shorter intermission than usual. Let's take this off. And all right, guys, I'm going to go to the super chats now. The entropy link is in the description, and let's see what people want me to talk about for, remaining hour, but hopefully a little less than 2 at this stage. I really want these things to be 2 hours because, guys, I really do think that the majority of my time should be spent writing and should be organizing basket weaving events. And although I do love live streaming, it does, it's noticeably worse than my video essay content. And sometimes I feel like oftentimes some ideas that should be turned into video essays get turned into live streams and are subsequently kind of lost to the sands of time, even though more people watch these things than watch the video essays. All right. Ring-o-matic. Is this working? Oh, dear. Hold on. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Just my screen's a little screwed up here. Okay, Ring-o-matic for $10 USA. Hey, Dave, I won't be able to catch this live, but I wanted to say thanks for the non-live work you do, as well as these live streams. I enjoy catching them the following day. Well, thanks. Yeah, again, I feel this is a running kind of thing here. I always prefer making video essays. The problem is video essays take much longer to do. I was thinking, the thing is that I back in the day, my usual process for making video essays was I have an idea, I'd write the idea down on a notepad, and then I would just get home, and because I was a grad student, I had kind of flexible hours, and I would just spit the idea the day I thought of it right into the microphone, and then over the course of the week I'd edit it, here and there when I had some time. And the editing was always easy because it was just an application that was in the background. I had a few extra seconds, codes compiling, whatever, you edit a little bit. But that's not how my life works anymore. My life works these days that I have like these very small avenues of time, very much at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, I am not capable. I don't have the energy to just spit a video into the microphone in one sitting. So these things have to be, the video essays have to be put together through multiple sittings, writing things down, typically long form, and they're usually literal essays, which means they take much longer to put together, and because of that, they're harder to produce, and these live streams are super easy. You turn the camera on, you're good to go. So, but thanks, man. Thanks for Ring-o-matic, and I'll go on to the next one. It's Ben White's weekly update. Ben White for $3 USA. Hi, Dave. I bumped into a girl who I went to college with last week during a local parish event. We talked and caught up with each other. A few days ago, she asked me to go out and have coffee with her. I think it's continued here, so I'm going to continue Ben White for another super chat. However, I ended up turning her down for the time being. As we all know from the Red Pillars, girls don't like men who come off as too eager. Instead, one should want girls to chase them instead. Hopefully this doesn't backfire on me. Haha. Well, if you're... Okay, Ben, I that's a good update, but you're playing a dangerous game here. So you turned down her initial proposal. Yeah, if you're interested, if you're keen on this girl, and you're trying to kind of play a little hard to get, so to speak, you definitely want to make a counter proposal in a way that so she knows you're interested, because she's going to be her mind's going to be looking for a reason to write you off pretty quickly. if you're like most guys, because women do not like getting rejected. So I always appreciate the updates, but who knows what modern dating looks like? At least if you're meeting women in real life, your prospects with them are astronomically better than they are online. And I say this as somebody who met their spouse online, albeit through a religious site, but real life is still the way to go with these things. It helps you develop confidence. And, I don't know. Maybe the dance is a little bit different. What do young Zoomer women even do these days? I always felt like there were these standard list of dates that worked on millennial women really, really well. Outdoor activities were always a nice go-to. I always had like one or two kind of snazzy places I thought were good date locations, and I pretend people you can always like bribe the bartender to pretend like you're a real regular and you know the place really well to seem like you're cooler than you actually are. Little things like that, right? You always have like this racket of 5 places you think are good date ideas that you can use to kind of facilitate proving to a woman that you're an active guy that can take direction. But who knows these days? You can always invite girls to basket weaving events, although I wouldn't recommend it. I've decided I'm really going to try to make a core part of this channel basket weaving. I thought maybe that a good feature might be to have a call-in show every now and again, or maybe office hours, where people can contact me about various basket weaving projects that they have in the works. That would be it might be a good community service that I could provide. Anyway, let's go on here. I'm going to maximize this a little bit so this is easier. Okay, Nerve AMV Maker for $20 USA. Which do you find more important for artistic flourishing? Which do you find more important for artistic flourishing beliefs of the artist? Which do you find more important? Artistic flourishing beliefs of the artist or the beliefs of his society? Victorian writers mostly bemoaned their culture despite it being the peak of the novel art form. Despite many great US and European writers being communists, the actual communist nations produced few good writers. Yeah, I would argue, obviously Bulgakov, the author of The Master and Margarita, is a great exception. Although I'm blanking on the name of this guy right now, the author of Dr. Zhivago, and that was, if you're talking about sort of sweeping romantic historical novels, the Dr. Zhivago is certainly one of the best novels of that genre in the 20th century. And so, there were some good ones. Obviously the goodness of a society is not embodied in its art. Although, I would say that the reason the Victorian artists will always kind of be at odds with their society. There's no two ways around that. But if you live in sort of a degenerate society that is incredibly low energy, even if you're incredibly against your society, it's very, very difficult to turn that into art. I should have brought this copy up with me here. I just got my copy of The Passage Prize and I'm reading it. And, I'll be honest with you guys, like, it's good, but it's very early work. It's very kind of like piloty. I remember a friend of mine I was a big Star Trek The Next Generation fan, and we always used to joke that Star Trek The Next Generation, the first 3 seasons were the pilot episode, because the first 2 or 3 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation are really uneven. They're not even really, they're really, like, the show has no idea what it's doing. The show, any episode where they have Tasha Yar still is among this. They have no idea who the main characters are. For a while, they think Wesley Crusher is the main character. For a while, they think Riker is the main character. It's not until really the second and third season where they realize that Picard is the center of the show. And they realize how the rest of the bridge crew fit into a Star Trek episode. And they're able to do it right. And The Passage Prize is very much in that state. The Passage Prize is in this, like, I read it, I'm halfway through, and like there are, 2 stories that I would consider to be really good ones, and I guess like for me that's enough, because it doesn't matter how many bad stories there are, as long as there are like a few good stories that are definitive artistic achievements. That's enough for me to see green shoots, because what it's telling me is that the problem is a matter of scale and scope. And if we just get twice as many submissions, then we'll be able to generate twice as many stories, right? And so like this is a process that will generate good art if you hit it enough. But one thing that does need to definitively get fixed about the Passage Prize, in my opinion, is that there was a common quality about the entries that I considered to be not good. And that is that the phrase I used with my wife was, they smell like the internet. There's never been a good story that describes, I mean, okay, there's been Neuromancer and the cyberpunk stories, and stories about like hacking stories, right? And stories that are romantic descriptions of something that occurs on the internet. And, you know, your mileage may vary. But there's not going to be an art form that is that I think is going to be very striking, where it feels like the thing in your hand is sort of some simulacra. It's a pointer that points to a real party that's occurring on the internet. You know, an internet notification that a real party is going on is useful to me. A real party where everyone talks about what they've seen on the internet is boring. This is something that millennials realize this, or at least my generation of millennials realize this, is when YouTube first came out, there are these things called YouTube watch parties. And people are like, oh, wow, you know, well, we have parties, you know, we like to have kind of like dinner parties. We like to watch YouTube videos, and everyone has like a new crazy video that they've seen. So why don't we have parties where people show the YouTube videos that they like? So instead of dinner and a movie, it's dinner and you watch YouTube videos. This is a disaster. It's a disaster, and it's lame and it's stupid because it destroys both the dinner and also the interaction you're having with these people, because everyone's sort of their mind is in their phones. At least when you go out to see a movie and then have dinner afterwards, you all have one common experience, which is you physically sitting in the movie theater, and then you physically sitting down for dinner. And the movie could be bad, the movie could be good, but this is something that you're experiencing. Whereas in the YouTube watch party, your brains are basically just your phones. What's actually going on is you have a YouTube account that's feeding you dopamine hits. And for the briefest moment, you're sharing that with your in real life friends. But the entire party smells like the internet. And there's no way of explaining this without bringing the internet into the thing. And the common feature of the worst elements of most of I'm not going to name names about what I think the stinkers were in the Passage Prize, but the common feature they all had is it felt like this was a meme. This was like a really good meme, and you turned it into a poem or a short story, and now it's very obviously the short story of the meme. Right? It's like movies based on video games. It doesn't work. It never will work unless there's something very, very different that happens. And and this is something that we need to learn. The problem with our present age is that all art is sort of being throttled by this thing that we call the internet. And in order to produce good art, even as people who are criticizing or describing this age that we live in, we need to describe our age as we experience it, not online. This is one of the reasons why basket weaving is so important. If the right wing does not have, if the online dissident right does not have, and we already have these things, so I'm not like saying that, you know, we have to develop this or fail, because we are in the process of developing it. It exists in many places. You know, it's just a question of, like the Passage Prize, it's just a question of taking these green shoots and making them grow taller and stronger. But it's so important that any distant space has an in real life instantiation. Because without the in real life instantiation, we are still in the mode of virtual objects. As real as I try to be with you guys, as much as I try to put my whole attention into this, as much as I try to make this show about things that are real, that we experience in the real world, without the component of reality, it's not going to be something that is even artistic. Highly moral and highly ordered ages tend to generate good art. And the Victorian age was the apex of that for our own civilization And as such, it will probably be the apex of human artistic output for the next 1,000 years, until we overcome this sort of civilizational slump or mini dark age that we're in. This is going to be the problem. And that is because all great human artistic achievement is based off of constraint. And in the Victorian age, not only was there physical constraint in the form of the real world, in the form of great exploration, in the form of scientific achievement that wasn't just digitally running numbers, in the form of literally colonizing places and creating new societies from scratch. Imagine the energy needed to actually do that. Not only was the Victorian period the age of those external constraints, it was also an age of ordered moral constraints, of constraints that were imposed by a moral system that made sense and that people actually believed in. And right now, we this is the great tragedy, is that we do have religious fanatics, the wokies, so to speak, but these religious fanatics aren't deep believers. They're believers in this belief system because it's the only thing available to them. It's the only thing they're allowed to believe in, and they desperately want to believe in something, so this is the closest thing to hand. And this is the only ideology they can believe in that will cost them essentially nothing. So they're fanatics of convenience. We do not know what it is like to live in an age where people really believe in things unironically, even things that I think are just definitively true. You know, realities like family and realities like religion, you know, which I have had. I always hate to say this because I haven't had really like a definitive religious experience like you see them in movies, but I've had moments where I felt sort of like a spirit rise in me, right? And where I think I felt sort of a presence of God. And I feel I'm a deep believer in God, in the sense that, like, whereas, you know, the specifics of religion I always struggle with in terms of doubt, the existence of a higher order is sort of intuitively just apparent to me. But we live in an age where you catch these moments of true belief sporadically. We don't live in them. You know, the reality of these beliefs are something that when we walk outside, every element of our society kind of pushes in the opposite direction, in the direction of the profane, in the direction of the spirit of the age is not in the direction of these core things of truth, goodness, and beauty. And as such, we kind of catch glimpses of them out of the corner of our eye. In the Victorian age, they lived the belief in civilization in every moment of their lives. It was an ever-present force. And because of that, it was an ever-present constraint. So love it or hate it, ascent or descent, you had this physical spirit that you were struggling with, like Jacob struggling against the angel. And that struggle is what creates great works of fiction. And I do think that we struggle with sort of an existential despair in our age. And I see in the good works in the Passage Prize, that's what we're seeing. But that fundamentally takes place in reality. And in many ways, we have to go seek out these struggles in order to find them, because the presence of sort of these internet hug boxes is always there, standing in the way of sort of the real thing that I think God is trying to communicate to us. And so, sorry, that's a very, very long answer. But I mean, I think, I really don't think ages can have artistic souls to them. I think ages have sort of moral souls, and they have sort of strong presences or weak presences. I think having artistic spirit is unique to the individual, but the man of the artistic spirit these days has to actually look for the spirit of the age. They have to search for it. They can't just walk outside like Henry James and experience a strong moral system incident on them in every social interaction, or they can't seek it like Rudyard Kipling in some unexplored area of India. Although Rudyard Kipling wasn't an explorer, but he was experiencing these sort of new kind of genuinely different cultures in a way that genuinely different cultures don't really exist in the present order in quite the same way. So to me, art is based on struggle and constraint, which is why, as Charlemagne says, all good art is right-wing art. All good communist art is right-wing art. I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, this is this is why you can look at these works of people who were absolute communists like Bertolt Brecht, and you start seeing these little right-wing themes emerge from within them, because they describe the struggle of their souls against reality, and that struggle naturally is not egalitarian. It naturally has all of these spikes and these qualities of hierarchy and order and moral peril that we know and live so well in our own lives, and that the modern progressive order seeks to deny. And so even despite themselves, the leftist artist becomes the carrier for right-wing ideas that he can't countenance. All right, MedWords for $3 USA. Today I learned about the term situationship. Okay, never heard of that term. Apparently, lingo that young adults my age use to describe informal pseudo relationships. So it's called situationship. Oh, like, so you don't relate to the person, you're just in a situation with them. So they're basically informal pseudo relationships with no genuine commitment. Decline of the West. FR. Yeah, that sounds like the stupidest. This is just the whole problem, guys. I mean, this is why we're really the anti-existentialist age, because the existentialists believed that form followed essence, but everything the millennial generation tries to do is it's like the internet psychos. Like they try to copy the form of the thing, and they hope that by copying the form of the thing, they'll naturally develop the essence of the thing. And that's not true, right? That's not true. It's not true that by calling yourself a woman, you become what a woman was to Shakespeare, or what a woman was to Henry James, or what a woman was to Tolstoy. I mean, you look at how Tolstoy describes women, and it's visceral, it's physical. It's this. There's this vitality to it that you can't mistake, and that's totally not present in our present concept of womanhood. Our present concept of womanhood is totally divorced from it. Our present concept of womanhood is a set of organs, or the facsimile of a set of organs, and lipstick and dresses and stuff like that. That's not what woman was to Tolstoy. That's not what woman was to Shakespeare. That's not what woman was to Chaucer. And everything about our generation is the continued attempt to manufacture the form with the hope that the essence will appear afterwards. But we know now, as the existentialists somehow missed, or tried to miss, or tried to ignore, and what the ancient thinkers always knew, that essence precedes form. Situationships will never be as meaningful as relationships. Relationships will never be as meaningful as marriage, because they do not imply constraint. They don't imply constraint in the good way. They don't imply constraint in the bad way. And as such, your soul has nothing to struggle against, except for the minimalistic elements of the contract itself. And that's why all polycules are squalid. There will never be a good love story written about a polycule. There will never be an interesting romance. There'll never be an interesting existential novel about a polycule, because the polycule by its very nature does not have an element of commitment to it. It only has an element of satisfaction, of compliance, of consent. These are weak forms. I mean, they're boring too. I mean, this is what the whole thing. They're boring. Why would I want to invite a situation? I would want to invite a married couple over to my house for dinner, but why would I would even in a pinch. I mean, my boyfriend and girlfriend's always a little bit strange for Catholics, but I invite people in a relationship over to the house. It would be interesting, right? Inviting a situationship over, like, that just feels weird and stupid. I'm inviting two individuals that happen to be sleeping together over to my house. There's nothing there. There's nothing there, as the poet said. All right, on to the next one here. Edwards for $3. He says, also a quote from my girlfriend's liberal roommate. My international finance professor is fine, but he has some wacky political opinions, like he thinks the EU is bad for Europe. Wow, I mean, yeah, lol. Imagine thinking that the EU is bad for Europe. Man, Edwards, I think you could rock this girl's world with a little bit of, I mean, I think that girls, if she's committed to you, you could expose her to some pretty wild ideas, some pretty wild stuff that might excite her imagination. Is she aware that there are more inspirational bodies of leadership than the EU? Who is the Napoleon of the EU? Who is the visionary of the EU? Who is the poet of the EU? Who is the Beethoven that will write the Eroica of the EU's conquest of Europe? Who is the Schiller that will give force to their ode for joy? Is it the weird satanic shit I see out of the Bohemian Grove people? Is that it? I mean, it's creepy for sure. But I mean, is your girlfriend aware of the heights that the human spirit can attain? Oh, when it's not stifled under the reins of this horrific bureaucracy. And there's a bigger world out there than the EU, and I mean, I think, like you say, like the EU is this, maybe it's a sleeping giant, maybe it's this dead giant. But it's this giant that's being colonized by these absolute Lilliputian midgets. And to see that as sort of a proper end to the story is to kind of live in a world of constrained imagination. No person of vitality can really see the position the EU has and their claim to power and not be at least a little bit disgusted by it. That's why these European vacations are always so eminently depressing, because you see these great palaces and these great cathedrals that are erected by these conquerors and these giants of men. And then everywhere you see this continent that was the height of civilization for so long, maybe the greatest civilization ever, or to date. And then you see it colonized by these utterly soulless bureaucrats, and the evidence of their work is everywhere. And it's watching something in advanced decay, and that's a genuine emotion. And I think that there's a certain pornographic element to this. There's a certain amount of decay porn, but we are creatures that are trying to find new life in the shadow of a decaying macroorganism. And that's just the reality of any art that we create. And it's a weird time to be alive and to try to make art and to try to process the world around you. Nervan V Maker for $5 USA. I'd like to say that your live streams can feel more like video essays than other live streams. It's easy for live streams to lose focus, get stuck on minutia, or hijacked by the chat. Yours are completely well focused and disciplined. Yeah, but they still. I appreciate that, Nervan VMaker, and thank you very much. But they are a lot less focused, and it's also harder for me to organize my own ideas. Like just this last week, Alex Kashuda asked me when was the time I talked about recently the view from nowhere. Which is this is a frequent theme on my channel. I stole the idea from a view from nowhere, too. From Roger Scruton, the actual phrase "a view from nowhere," and I couldn't honestly tell her because I couldn't remember. If it had been a video essay, and I gave her a video essay I did in 2018 about the concept, or 2017 about the concept, but that was old. That was not what she was referring to. And so the problem with these video essays is that it's very difficult for me to figure out when I talked about a certain idea. And so, first of all, the problem of possible redundancy always haunts me. And obviously talking about the trad versus BAP side thing, that's been something I've talked about many times, and I'm well aware of that. But yeah, it's easier for me to organize my thoughts in the form of video essays, but my life just might not be there anymore. I might have to do a video essay once every 1 or 2 months, and then just do regular podcasts, because that's how I actually get compensation for doing the blog, which is in the light of inflation a little necessary sometimes for the outcropping of time. Another irritating thing, I realize this thing, that's always the thing that irritates me about the internet psycho. Whenever I hear people bring up plagiarism in a willy-nilly way, like they accuse people of plagiarism, and it's not, and they don't have like literal copy pasted to evidence it, I immediately assume that they're either ignorant of how academia actually works, or they're an internet psycho. Because if anybody who's talking like I am right now is going to implicitly or unwittingly copy someone else's idea. Magic words. That phrase is not my own. I think Chairman Mao may have used it. Certainly, Jonathan Bowden referred to that a few times. View from nowhere isn't my idea. Constitutionalism is the white man's ghost dance is not my idea. I have no idea where these ideas came from or the first person to talk about them was. They come from the internet somewhere. They're not my ideas. I made videos on them, which included my own original ideas superimposed on these phrases. But any internet psycho is going to read these things and accuse me of plagiarism, right? Because this is YouTube. This is me talking about ideas that I have seen on the internet somewhere and elaborating on them extemporaneously. I can't have the kind of controls that I'd have for some kind of published academic paper. And if you have no ethics or no knowledge of how plagiarism accusations actually work and what gives them force, you just make them willy-nilly and cause people to run around like chickens with their heads cut off, and so on and so forth. All right, well, thank you, Nerve and VMaker. I'm going to go on to the next one now. Batman Bad for $3 Canadian. Ever since my dad got his cancer back, I find myself less desiring to engage with the outside world. I just can't afford to be pessimistic anymore, especially on politics. Well, pessimistic, once you kind of acknowledge the fact that we are where we are, you get a lot less pessimistic. You kind of just deal with the world as it is. I guess you still feel things getting worse. You still see things like this horrific chemical explosion in East Palestine, and think to yourself, this is going to happen all the time now, and nobody's going to do anything about it. We're just going to start poisoning a large amount of core Americans. And not only is the intellectual class not going to sympathize, they're going to psychotically tweet that these people deserve it because they vote Republican or something. It's hard not to get depressed by that. But here's the thing, Batman Bad. More and more people are saying this, and If you find a community of people who also see this problem and are able to commiserate, you'll be able to internalize the state that we are in, better, more effectively. The fall of Rome for someone like St. Augustine was catastrophic. It was depressing. But for Charlemagne, who lived in its aftermath, or for the Merovingian kings before him, it was just the background radiation. Rome was a pile of ruins. That's just how things were. And you were a new Rome. And did you really care that your new Rome had less technology and less literacy and ruled over an area that was only the smallest fraction of what Augustus's empire was during the birth of Christ? Probably not really. I imagine the real Charlemagne lost very little sleep over that. And we should lose very, very little sleep over decline that's already been manifested. We should only lose sleep over our own community and our own ability to feed these green shoots that are growing up around us. And really, I definitively believe we're getting to the point where there are publications you can read that are from people like us. There are social organizations that are run by people like us, at least the beginnings of them. Our objective is just to help these things grow. Is just to take iterative steps and to cross boundaries. The first boundary, again, is going to be breaking down the boundary between us and the conservative movement. And that's going to involve synthesizing. And the reason why I bring up this BAP stuff, it's going to involve synthesizing the observations that are made by people like Bronze Age Pervert with the truths of Christianity and the reality that the healthiest part of our society, what's left of it, is Christian. That's the part that still has children. That's the part that's actually curious about new ideas, and that's looking to a future world that they actually inhabit. It's not that I don't see the problems with modern Christianity. I'm very aware of them. And for that reason, I don't want to dunk on these people like Bronze Age Pervert. I want to have them stop doing stupid, self-destructive shit. to put not too fine a point on it, bad men bad. So I would advise you to. I think the best thing anyone ever can do is take a walk. Take a walk outside and kind of take in the good and the bad, and the beauty that exists even in our own declining world. And because of that, I think you're kind of you'll end up with a new attitude, a much more productive one. Western Sun for $10. Thank you very much. Dave, I chatted in 2 weeks ago about my terminal diagnosis. Oh my God. Well, yes, I remember. Sorry. Thank you very much for the super chat. Here's your super chat continued. For $20. It's displaying. Your advice has resonated with much of what I have felt in terms of where to spend my energy. My relationship with God and family have taken a new meaning. God has a funny way of getting to us, getting us drawn nearer to Him. I'm inclined to creativity and have made things that will be around long after I'm gone. Thank you. Well, Western Sun, thank you very much. And if you want to share any of those things, I'd love to talk about them on my podcast. Like I said, my podcast here exists to try to help people facilitate their own creative endeavors insofar as I possibly can, right? And one of the first things I'm doing is I'm trying to get. So right now I have some Scottish fiddle with the Alistair Fraser and Natalie Haas, I believe, are the artists who I'm big fans of, and it's from a live session of theirs that I don't think was ever published by a record company. But first of all, it still triggers the YouTube IP regulations. But more important than that, I don't want any part of this show to not be made artistically by a non-ally. I want this show to be 100% the product of stuff that's produced by this community. So I'm looking for somebody else in the community that's that can produce fiddle music for me. Originally, I was going to Anglo Ortho and his lovely wife to get the fiddle music, but I've heard through the grapevine that they have a family disruption of the good variety that should be celebrated that will preclude them in the short term, making a recording. So for the time being, I am looking for fiddle music that I can use for my intro and my intermission music. I don't know how frequent I'll keep this podcast, at least once a month. Even if I decide to make this sort of a bi-weekly thing, and then use the remaining time for doing more long-term projects. But yeah, I want every element of this to be created by fans, and I'm kind of behind organizationally, so I'll try to include that in my thing. If you have some artistic work that you'd like to share, Western Son, again, my prayers are for you and your diagnosis that's terminal. But I'm really glad to hear that your relationship with God and your family has been improving. I always hear this, and I always think how kind of I let my own spiritual life slip. I feel like my spiritual life is always at the highest during Lent, which is next week, and it always drops off precipitously sometime in midsummer. And it's oh man, it's so funny. It's so funny. Human beings only live when they're in crisis. We only live when we have constraint. When something is being done to us that's not comfortable. The millennial generation's been poisoned by dopamine. We have no identity because everything we do is comfortable. Is an entertainment product. And so we have no understanding of the world outside of that. And because of that, our art sucks. Because of that, our relationship with anything spiritual sucks. And we have no mode to communicate with real spiritual language. Prayers, Western Son, and thank you very much for your generous super chat. I hope that I could talk to you again as much as possible. And, I do a really bad job at checking the out replies because I'm answering super chats and entropy, but, maybe that would be a good thing to do. So I'm not charging you. Ben White, $5 USA. Someone once told me that in order to have a good king, the people need to have a kingly people. What transformations would Americans have to undergo to become a kingly people? It seems we deserve strong men and not a saint for a ruler. Well, yeah, the big problem right now is, for our generation, Ben White, is the attention economy. The problem right now is that we don't know how to... The whole point of monarchy is that you're submitting to somebody who is a representation of something better than yourself. And the attention economy encourages the exact opposite of this. I will acknowledge, for instance, at least from my own perception, that Anglo Ortho is spiritually more advanced than me. And I want to learn from him. And I would say that academic agent is more academically accomplished than I am. Does that mean that I'm going to, not defend my own opinions? Does that mean that I'm? But it does mean that, in order, everybody has to submit. Everybody has to become less prominent, and they have to admit their own failings. They have to admit that they don't have anything to say necessarily in this conversation. And they have to make way for the people. And even if people get what they have through dumb luck, they have to acknowledge when someone is more capable of delivering a certain kind of good to the community than they are. To a certain degree, people like Curtis Yarvin are where they are because they were here first. They were talking about these things in 2007 when almost nobody with a similar means was doing the same thing. And that's the reality. And because of that, they're able just to deliver a certain amount of good to the community that might even, writing style aside, might be just the product of dumb luck. But it behooves us as a sort of kingly people to not hold that against them. And if they use that talent for the greater good, that should be enough for us. Because the objective is not ourselves. We are all going to die. Yeah, I guess, I'll answer this question quite definitively, Ben. There can be no kingly people without an understanding of our own mortality. I'm going to die, right? My YouTube career is going to end, and I will never be somebody who can live off of this stuff. The legacy of this product that I'm producing right now is going to be embodied in whoever carries on after me. And while I do appreciate the super chats because they help me with family expenses, there is no greater glory I have in myself. Whatever is going to persist here is going to persist in people who are not myself. And do I really care if that greater good that occurs after me is brought by Todd Lewis or Charlemagne or Academic Agent? I just want the proper idea to get out there. I just want the truth to be made manifest. I just want there to be a path towards hope for my son, for all of our children. And that's the reason why we're here. Okay, thank you very much, Ben White. Yeah, a kingly people, first and foremost, have to be aware of their own mortality, and they have to be aware of what that mortality implies for their own political ambitions. We have brief lives. Our legacy is our children, our people, our faith, and always God. And nothing more. And, ultimately, probably not even our own families or civilizations, because those are temporal too, regrettably. Mark Faraz for $10 USA. Sent you a request on DM Skype. Okay, well, I never check Skype other than to talk to the Franklin, so it might be a little bit slow there. I'm trying to limit my social medias here. Hope to catch up with you as a fellow tech industry and culture critic. MetaThink is my channel, sharing many concerns and thoughts of yours and your journey. Well, I've heard of MetaThink, Mark. I would love to talk to you sometime. I'm a little bit backlogged right now. I'm trying to find time to talk to the Franklin, Mark Selner, and Conscious Caracol. And I've promised each of them live streams, and I'm struggling for time. Maybe a Tuesday night would be a good time for it. But thank you. I'll definitely reach out. It would be good to touch bases. Thank you very much for the super chat. John Ford for $15 USA. Aaron Red had a 50-minute video about marriage in the modern age. I'll DM it to you on Twitter or Telegram if you'd like. Love the video essay content. Love the lecture. For my own Ben White story, I went to an LDS function, Latter-day Saints for the people not in the know, an LDS function for speed dating, and sadly, the dudes are wimps and the women are disinterested. Sad. Well, if the dudes are wimps, that's great for you, right? You've got, did you run it or were you actually participants in it? There's some truth to women's complaints about modern men sometimes. I'll say that, right? And modern men need to come in contact with experiences that are going to kind of toughen them up a little bit. I don't know how these experiences are going to be communicated with them. Sports would be a great way to do it. Outdoor activities would be a great way to do it. I don't know. Do board anything competitive? It seems that's not video games. Seems like it would be a good way to do this. But men need to have ways of this whole idea that you can play dating like a slot machine is ridiculous. Men need to first focus on sort of proving themselves to other men, and then only secondarily worry about attracting women. And something tells me that if they focus on the first task, the later will come naturally, and you won't have these speed dating dates where there's like 20 guys who look like, that they have testosterone problems in their early 20s. I don't know. I guess I assumed initially, Mr. Ford, that you were actually a candidate in this speed dating system. I always like to think that the speed dating, if you're the lone man in the sea of boys, works out for you. But maybe I'm wrong, and speed dating there's sort of a network effect where if everybody is just a total soy boy, women kind of ride off the herd writ large and decide that they're just going to check their phones in between little mini dates. But anyway, yeah. Hopefully, I'll check out that Aaron Wren video that you forwarded me. Thank you very much. Monk with no pants for $25 USA. Around the Matt Walsh argument, strong families are the long game, assuming proper catechesis of our children. Demographically, the numbers show huge declines on the horizon, with Western populations halving in the next 15 years and going terminal. Mormons and Amish will be the majority in 300 years, assuming the current state. 100% Monk with no pants. But I mean, you only got half the equation here, because in the current state is doing a lot of work for you. Historically speaking, your ability to maintain educational institutions, which is a critical step in this reproductive process, is hugely threatened by the emergence of political power that is antithetical or oppositional to your aims, to your interests. And as such, the bad people aren't wrong saying that you're not going to save yourself just by having families. There's another component to this that needs to be facilitated, which is some kind of political force that can push back and obtain concessions from government itself. And the more unified and more monarchical this force is, the stronger. I mean, really, to be honest, the Elon Musk stuff convinced me that you need to be fast and directed by like a few central people. The more directed and more organized and more monarchical this is, the better chance it's going to have to get you what you need to continue your families and your faith. I don't see a way around that. But thank you, Monk with no pants. I'll go on here. Creeper weirdo. That's a question again. Okay. Creeper weirdo for $5 USA. You know something weird I noticed this month? It's a Black History Month, and it feels like nobody cares. Also started reading A Clockwork Orange and love it. Yeah, if you want an even more creepily prophetic book by the same author, I think it's Anthony Burgess, read The Wanting Seed. If you think Clockwork Orange is creepy and prophetic, you ain't seen nothing yet, right? Although I don't know if that one, I mean, it was obviously not made into a movie, so people remembered a lot less than The Clockwork Orange. But yeah, I mean, this is what the woke is over type deal. Black History Month feels a lot like every other month, because everyone's enthusiasm for this wokeness stuff has completely gone out the window. And the amount of African Americans you can put into things has kind of been saturated to a certain degree, to the extent that it can be. And everyone's very, very tired of this stuff at this stage. And so the novelty of the entire affair is completely worn off. And so you can see how sort of the religious ceremonies lose their bite after the political impetus has kind of faded away as we get further and further away from 2020. Also, there was this huge sort of eruption, this sort of wrongful death that occurred with this guy in what was it? Oh, where was the city? It was some Midwestern city where these 5 black police officers, looks like they murdered somebody, and then they're black guy. And this got, relative to George Floyd, almost no coverage. And it's because narratively does not work for the people in power right now. There's no audience for it. there's no power to be gained from it. There's no way to feel like a hero on the backs of this, because they can't have a big anti-police drive at this stage. Every reigning bureaucracy of a major metropolitan area right now is trying to figure out their crime problem and how to stop it. They don't want to have activists crawling down their throat to defund police activities, or to have some kind of big police regulation that's going to prevent police from doing their job, or that's going to decrease police recruitment. They can't have that happen. And so the energy to all this stuff kind of drains away as it becomes inconvenient for the ruling class to touch it anymore. But thank you, Creeper Weirdo. I appreciate it. Ben White again for $3. I did give a counter offer 3 weeks later. The girl is from a conservative home, a conservative homeschooled family, and is explicitly anti-woke. Regular Latin mass goer too. Definitely has trad wife potential. Well, I mean, it seems like this girl is. I mean, he sounds like you've captured a unicorn, dude. I mean, you know, obviously, like, look, you know, make sure your personality jives with this girl, and hold this out for a possibility. But it sounds like this might be a good prospect. It sounds like, I mean, for me, I mean, obviously, I think personality alignment is important to have in the present age, because more and more your wife has to be sort of a co-owner, a co-executive of you in this family, because more often than not, she's going to be a partial income source. And, but so personality alignment's a big deal, I think. But having the right values for me is always number one. You just don't want to be fighting with your woman over values ever, because your enemies will be using that as a weapon against you. And it's never a battle you want to be fighting at all. So you want any prospective romantic prospect to be either values neutral or sympathetic to your values. And if you have that, I think you have a good prospect. And of course, you know, looks obviously for guys that matters a little bit. But, you know, to be honest, let's be honest, guys, it's pretty binary, right? She either does or doesn't, right? And so you know, you never want to kind of you never want to kind of be making big sacrifices to get, you know, someone who's marginally more attractive. I don't know, it doesn't really work. Creeper Weirdo for $5 USA. You know something weird I noticed this month? Wait, I just answered that question. Hey Dave, have you seen any videos by a woman named Maggie Mae Fish? I don't think even you could get anything out of her content. All I'll say is she's exactly who you think she is. Well, Maggie Mae Fish sounds like a drag queen. Is this person a drag queen? Right? I mean, isn't fish a drag queen term? Yeah, I mean, given the content of this live stream, I'm going to assume that this person is both a drag queen and also a pseudo-academic internet psycho of the President Sunday variety. So there we go. That sounds like a person who I really don't want to watch now. But thank you for the forward. Yevsi for $3 Canadian. I saw a tweet today saying Silicon Valley pushed trans manja before it's transmania, because it's easier to tell a nerd he's a girl for diversity than make a woman or a black code. Thoughts? Okay. So Silicon Valley pushed transmania because it's easier to get a nerd to tell the diversicrats that he's a girl than to teach a woman how to code. I mean, yeah, this is obviously not explicitly what they were thinking. But you see some place like Discord, you have a hard time not imagining that, you know, transition sort of autistic programmers wasn't an active part of their business model. It's hard to see something like Discord and not feel that plays into their whole vision of the future. I don't know. I mean, I think that this trans thing is going to go in phases, right? So initially, when was it Blanchard, the Blanchard's typology? When he first did his studies, there were definitively two types of trans women. There were the early onset transitioners, which were all essentially gay men who identified with females from a very young age. And then there were late onset transitioners, and what Blanchard called onogynephilia, basically, which were almost universally straight for most of their lives and whose trans identity came on much, much later after they were already established professionally. And this creates what sort of Steve Saylor calls, I mean, there were, many people fell into this sort of late onset category, but because of how the trans phenomenon rolled out in the male to female zone, Steve Saylor pointed out that an enormous number of the transitioners early on, like Caitlyn Jenner, were like super ultra macho men. These were like CEOs and ace programmers, and these are people who succeeded at being men, and sort of like their Faustian attempt at reaching for the next hurdle over the horizon was for them to, after they nailed being a man, was to nail being a woman. And the challenge obviously played into the appeal of this prospect. What we're going to see, and I think, when you talk about the image of the trans computer programmer, which is definitely a thing in Silicon Valley, what you're seeing is sort of the tail end of it, right? When you're past the sort of alpha CEO transitioners, and you go back, and the trans phenomenon is going to kind of start falling back. It's going to start appealing to lower and lower and lower status people. So then you get sort of the professional but not alpha male late onset transitioners. And then you're going to get to sort of the people who are obviously suffering from high-end autism and depression transitioners. And you see this, and Steve Saylor tweeted, I referenced Steve Saylor a lot on this podcast, but he tweeted out he was surprised to see that if you looked at the rates of transitioners inside sort of flagship school systems like UC or University of Michigan or University of Wisconsin, the rate of transition in the flagship schools like Cal or UCLA or University of Michigan Ann Arbor or University of Wisconsin-Madison, those flagship schools have a lower rate of transition than the satellite schools where all the where students go. And the reason for that is because this phenomenon that I'm talking about, the sort of late onset transition phenomenon, it's going to start appealing to lower and lower and lower and lower quality people until the trans phenomenon will likely be an outgrowth of the lower 20% of men, just writ large. The whole trans maxing thing that incels talk about. The way out of inceldom, the way out of loserdom, the way out of neatdom is transition. And this will start becoming more and more a thing. And when that becomes a large part of what being trans means, I think you'll see the beginning of the end of the Progressive Coalition in a very real and meaningful way at that point. But probably not until then. I hope that answers the question. So, thank you very much. Carter for $10 USA. Hey, Dave, my uni, in my uni, a trans Jewish student got into an argument over communism with an anti-communist type kid. Upset, he called in to a DEI investigator to get the kid fired over an alleged misgendering during the argument. I defended the kid from the DEI. Did I do the right thing? What's the takeaway? The takeaway, I believe that it's always good to defend people when they look, it's obviously a calculated risk defending people, right? I believe there's two if I were in your position from how you describe it, where you have somebody who's like very, very definitively a client class and who's obviously gaming the DEI stuff to jockey for status, and you're in a university, I would always defend the people who are the victims of a cancellation campaign. First of all, in very rare circumstances, is your defense of somebody who's being canceled going to spill over to you? And usually you can take steps to insulate yourself from cancellation. You know, these cancellation campaigns are opportunistic. So if you look like really photogenic, or if you have like a really sterling reputation among the community, you can sort of front that. And the sort of cowardly people these cancel vultures are, they're going to see that and they're going to kind of go like, oh man, maybe I don't want to take that on. So because you're going to the situation knowing that you're dealing with people who are cancel vultures, you can kind of take precautions so that the spillover is not going to be a risk. And with that in mind, I would always consider defending people against cancellation campaigns to be a good move, because it shows you to be sort of the bigger man. It builds an ally for yourself and the person who's being canceled. They'll never forget that you gave them a helping hand. And third of all, I mean, this sounds sort of quaint. I believe it's our Christian duty to stand up and speak truth to power. And when you stand against cancellation campaigns that are unjust, like you're describing, you are speaking truth to power. And I don't think that if you don't do that as a Christian, you have to have a damn good prudential excuse not to do that. And like a really damn good prudential excuse. Because I believe if you are in a position where you can help somebody who's being a victim of a false witness, and you don't take that opportunity to help them, you've probably committed a sin, unless there's some kind of exonerating circumstances. So I would say, from what the information you're giving me, you did the right thing defending that person, both strategically and morally. Sam153 for $20 USA. Evening, Dave. I appreciate your wisdom as always. What do you think the regime is trying to distract from with all of these balloons? It just seems to be too fake. Are they just out of ideas? Well, I think the train derailments would be, they obviously don't want those to be in the news. There are a few other ones that happened over this, this weekend, that just sort of added insult to injury. If this is indeed planned, which is like 50-50 yes or no, probably what they're really afraid about getting into the news is the fact that the NATO forces and Ukrainian forces don't appear to be doing very well in the Russia-Ukraine war right now. And their narrative, at least throughout all of this fall, was one of triumphalism, was one of, we're winning, give more money. We're winning, give more money. Well, now the American people really, really, really don't want to give more money, and it does not appear like they're winning anymore. So they want more than anything else to keep that out of the news. Now, I say this with a grain of salt, because who knows what the hell is happening in Ukraine. There's no reliable information that's coming out of that area right now. But sort of reading in between the lines, reading what the media is not saying, reading what some sort of unreliable Russian sources are saying, that points to the fact that NATO allied forces are not doing so hot in the last 2 months. And I'm sure that they want to keep that out of the news. So, I mean, that's my speculation about what they're trying. There's just this general level of incompetence that they'd really rather be talking about anything else. They'd rather be talking about UFOs and Chinese balloons and space aliens and so on and so forth. Medwords for $3 USA. For clarity, that quote was not from my girlfriend, but from her friend. My girlfriend is not reactionary, but she is a committed Catholic and her mother is Indonesian and a Tucker Carlson fan. They watch him together. Okay, well, it sounds like you got a good deal then, right? I mean, look, guys, like, if your girl's watching Tucker Carlson, that's as ideologically as you need anyone to get. She only needs to be skeptical of the powers that be and not their servant. Because if you marry her, you and her will be one political entity, and she will be on your team. She will be part of your monarchy, basically. As I always say, women make 99% of all decisions in the households and hold 0% of the sovereignty, or they decide 0% of the exceptions. And that's sort of a natural way to the power is divvied up inside a marriage. But that's all you really need. You don't need women to be reading Julius Evola. I mean, you really don't. I mean, maybe if she finds it fun, sure. Although I have this cringe vision of, I do definitely respect Philosophicat's research into Julius Evola, but every time I watch her content, I have this horrific vision of like some woman who's like 10 IQ points dumber than her reading Julius Evola and treating it like the reactionary version of astrology. And so instead of having people ask if like you're an Aries or a Capricorn, you have like some woman ask you if you have a lunar or solar dimension in your spirit in the Evolian sense. And some things just aren't for midwits, guys. And and some things just aren't really for the fairer sex, no matter how high their IQ is. And I'm sure Philosophica has a very high IQ, and she does excellent work with Evola. But yeah, thank you. Okay, I answered that one. Society Man, hey, how's it going, man? Well, back in the Discord days, we were friends, good friends, and we're still friends, but I always love seeing the super chats from Society Man. Society Man for $5 USA. Hey Dave, the first successful basket weaving session happened recently. Coincidentally, it was scheduled at a time and venue adjacent to a talk on white supremacy. Well, hey, I hope that the basket weaving event went really well. It's kind of coming alive right now. I hope to plan. I'm kind of trying to come out with some surveys so that the planning committee can get a better idea of what people actually want to be doing for basket weaving. And so we can come up with templates, ideas for people to put forward for basket weaving events so they can be promoted locally and regionally. But I'm so glad that you kicked off the first one, Society Man. That's great. I'm not so sure. So I guess what you're saying is that it was adjacent to an event that was sort of decrying white supremacy, or that was calling it out. This white supremacy stuff, everything is white supremacist, and it pained me. This whole Rod Dreher thing, with the whole Accord affair and the Tullius affair, as I call it. It pained me to see that there were actually conservative Christians out there who think that white supremacy is a real political force in modern America, or who don't understand the historical joke played on them when progressives mainstream this idea that that white supremacy is some kind of active political force that we need to censor out of the ranks of right wingers. This is absolutely nuts. It would be, this is absolutely positively nuts. So, well, very glad to see that you got the basket weaving going, and I always enjoy hearing from you, Society Man. Lavio Sierra for $5 USA. Hi, Dave. Just wanted to encourage people to join the call basket, the California basket weaving server. Met up with Bearaway Quill for a disappointing farmer's market and a nice chat. P.S. Apologies to Rigomatic for moving away. Best of luck living under the rule of Castro's son. Well, I assume you moved away from Canada. The thing is, Laviossier, I have 1 foot in Canada and 1 foot in California and 1 foot in Seattle and 1 foot in New Jersey, New York area. And right now you're probably wondering why I'm an octopus. But I always love hearing how these communities are faring, because It's the blue urban areas. If we can get that to work, everything else will work too. If my theory is correct on how this stuff operates, if the blue areas can come together, everything else will flow out from that. The root will be established. So thanks very much. Yeah, shout out, like the basket weaving server should be in the description of this YouTube channel right now. If you, I don't know if I put it in this particular one. It will definitely be in the first comment that I pin after this stream goes into the VOD form. So if people are watching this afterwards, feel free to check out the server. I see someone in the chat says bowling, classic stuff. I think the best basket weaving stuff would be ideally around some kind of physical activity. But like your typical bar meetup for discussion is always great. It always feels like I want more though, you know? So, but really wanting more basket weaving is just a function of getting a regular group of people that can meet a definitive time every month, every week, every 2 months if you're, more distantly situated. And I know energy is expensive, travel is expensive. That's part of the way that they kill community in America. It is what it is. We have to roll with these punches. But thank you, Lavoisier. I appreciate the super chat. Alternative avenues for $5. Do that pin. Months ago, you made an offhand comment about making acoustic baffles from paper towel rolls and egg cartons. Yeah, acoustic sound insulation. Yeah, exactly. The play, you probably can hear this in the microphone right now, but I'm in a terrible acoustic situation. You can hear every little thing from the outside area. It's just an absolutely atrocious situation. I have been saving now, and I have 2 trash bags full of, but can't find good instructions. Well, I mean, can't you just... I mean, am I wrong in thinking that you can't just staple egg cartons to a cardboard sheet and use that as sound insulation? Is that not good enough? I mean, I've kind of been hoping that that's good enough myself. I'm sure there's like YouTube videos on how to build these things, right? I'm afraid that I can't give you advice right now on how to do that. So I'll have to kind of punt on that. So anyway, thank you very much. All right, Creeper Weirdo. Okay, Creeper Weirdo for $5 USA. Maggie Mae Fish is a biological woman, but she's also an internet psycho, to be fair. If a person wasn't trans, I'd tell you, Dave. Okay, well, internet psychos, I just have no time for these people. They're all going to end up on the left anyway. Anyone who comes on the internet and tries to nail people and tries to cancel people, like if they're more interested in getting people to hate other people than they are getting their own ideas across, if they're more interested in sort of, if they come onto the scene and immediately expect accolades for their achievement before they've even developed any friends, if they immediately try to accuse people of plagiarism or try to tear people down for liking somebody else, if they try to question people's Christian beliefs without demonstrating Christian practice themselves, I immediately think internet psycho. I immediately think somebody who's playing the President Sunday game. And these people, even if they start reading Schmidt, including G.K. Chesterton, they're all going to end up on the left. Because the left is the place where you go to collect clout and cancel people. There's no space on the right for doing this. There's not enough clout on here for cancel vultures to get any by canceling us. And nobody's going to play ball with us either. Nobody's going to invite you on the stream to relitigate their academic credentials because you've got a deep voice in this place. It's not going to work. And, eventually we'll all get over this. So... that actually is the end of my super chats this evening. I'm, I guess I'm before 12 o'clock, so that's nice. I'm going to continue with my Psalm readings here. Let's go for Psalm 3. So tonight's Psalm, Psalm 3. How many are my foes, O Lord? How many are rising up against me? How many are saying about me, there is no help in him, God? But you, Lord, are a shield about me, my glory who lifts up my head. I cry aloud to the Lord. He answers from his holy mountain. I lie down to rest and I sleep. I wake, for the Lord upholds me. I will not fear even thousands of people who are ranged on every side against me. Arise, Lord, save me, my God, you who strike all my foes on the mouth, you who break the teeth of the wicked. O Lord of salvation, bless your people. Anyway, guys, that's the psalm reading for the night. Although I always, this is why I always love psalms, because they're designed for a period of chaos and crisis, and they always seem to kind of speak to the environment we're in. Even if we're arrayed on all sides by clout chasers and psychopaths, very little of what they do can actually reach us. Even if we're surrounded by an unending ocean of bullshit generated by AI, it's not going to stop us from making friends with real people and using their art and using their short stories to give color to our light, or to give color to our lives. And for that reason, and for the reason of God, I'm always eternally hopeful about what the future has in store for us. I think that the human race has a long future ahead of us after this period of chaos kind of burns itself out, and all sort of the frauds kind of are exposed for what they are. Anyway, guys, that's the end of the live stream tonight. Hopefully I'll produce more written content this coming month, and I will see all of you probably next Tuesday, and if not before, with live streams with guests on my channel. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week, a happy St. Valentine's Day. Cheers and blessings to you all, and have a wonderful night.